Beckett's truth: there's no meaning, and that's the point. Imagine you wake up one day and everything is exactly as it was yesterday. Same sunlight, same walls, same people, same thoughts. You go through the motions: eat, shower, work, scroll, sleep, and yet, beneath the surface, there's a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor. A whispering voice that asks, "What's the point of all this?" You ignore it. You distract yourself, but it keeps coming back. And that voice, quiet as it may be, is the doorway into a question that Samuel Beckett confronted head-on. What if there is no meaning? And what if that's not a tragedy, but a liberation? Beckett's world is bleak, sure. His characters often sit in the rubble of existence, repeating the same gestures, uttering the same lines, hoping for something to happen, and nothing ever does. Take Waiting for Godot, where two men wait endlessly for someone who never arrives. On the surface, it seems absurd, pointless. But what if Beckett was showing us a mirror, not of despair, but of truth? What if the endless waiting is the point? What if the absence of meaning is exactly where our freedom lies? We've been taught from a young age that life should be meaningful, that we're here for a reason, that there's a purpose waiting for us if we just look hard enough. But Beckett dismantles that assumption. He doesn't do it with cynicism, he does it with surgical precision. He strips away the illusions we cling to, that love will save us, that success will validate us, that time is linear and progress is inevitable. In Beckett's universe, time loops, language fails, and the search itself becomes the story. And here's the twist: when meaning collapses, something unexpected happens. We stop chasing. We stop pretending that the next thing, a new job, a new relationship, a spiritual awakening, will finally make everything make sense. Beckett forces us to look at the raw fact of our being, not through the lens of some grand narrative, but just as we are, confused, repetitive, stuck, and still here, still breathing, still speaking, still waiting.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
But this isn't a call to give up. It's a call to wake up. Because once we admit that life might not have some cosmic instruction manual, we're free to start living it on our own terms. We're free to stop performing, and to stop justifying everything we do with some greater goal, to stop needing everything to mean something. And in that moment, we begin to live differently, not with despair, but with radical honesty, and with a strange kind of joy. Because if nothing matters in the ultimate sense, then everything matters in the immediate one. But think about it. If there's no final scorecard, if no God or universe is keeping tabs, then the way you smile at a stranger, the way you sip your coffee, the way you speak to your parents, these fleeting, unrecorded things become sacred. Not because they're part of some master plan, but because they aren't. They're just happening, and you're here for them. That's all. And that's everything. Beckett's characters often repeat themselves, not because they're stupid or broken, but because repetition is what life is. You wake up, you try, you fail, you try again, you forget, you remember, you eat the same meals, you say the same apologies, you fall into the same patterns. And the beauty is not in escaping that cycle, but in inhabiting it fully, with eyes open, with no need for it to be more than it is. So let me ask you, what if your life never gets better than it is right now? Could you still find meaning in it, even if meaning doesn't exist? That's the Beckett question, and it's terrifying. But it's also profound. Because when you stop demanding meaning from life, you start noticing the life that's actually here. the crack in the sidewalk, the breath before you speak, the silence after someone leaves. These things don't need to mean anything to be real. They just are, and so are you. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. From nothing to now, how absurdity sets you free. We don't like absurdity. We resist it. We try to organize chaos, to impose structure on the shapeless, to make sense of the mess. But the truth is, absurdity is not the enemy of meaning, it's the soil from which real freedom grows. Samuel Beckett understood this better than almost anyone. He didn't write stories with traditional arcs or moral conclusions. He didn't dress up life to make it prettier or more palatable. Instead, he dragged us into the mud and made us sit with the absurdity until something cracked, and what cracked wasn't the world, but our illusion about it. To live is to be absurd. We are born without asking into a world we don't control, governed by rules we didn't write, moving toward a death we can't avoid. And yet we love, we build, we dream, we laugh. That contradiction between the meaningless structure of life and the meaning we crave to impose on it is the heart of the absurd. Albert Camus called it the confrontation between the human need and the unreasonable silence of the world. Beckett didn't argue with that silence. He echoed it. He embodied it. And in doing so, he showed us that the only honest place to begin is with the acknowledgement that the silence is real, and it's not going away. But here's what makes Beckett radical. Instead of trying to escape the absurd, he leaned into it. He took the contradiction and made it art. He embraced the repetition, the failure, the collapse of logic, and said, "This is it." And in that act, he revealed something most of us miss, that absurdity is not the end of truth, but the beginning of authenticity. When you stop pretending that life owes you a purpose, or that the universe is secretly rooting for your success, you begin to live more honestly. You begin to live now. Think about how often we delay living. We wait for the next goal, the next stage, the next sign that we're finally on the right path. But Beckett says, what if there is no path? What if you're already here, and this is it? Waiting for Godot is not just a play, it's a metaphor for the way we all wait. Looking for someone to save us, for something to make sense, for some grand moment to validate our existence. But maybe the only real moment is the one you're in. Not because it leads somewhere, but because it doesn't. This is where the absurd becomes liberation. If nothing matters in the grand scheme, then you're free to matter to yourself. If the world won't assign you meaning, then you get to create it or not. You can sit in silence. You can laugh in the face of despair. You can cry without needing a reason. You can live without a script. That's not nihilism. That's rebellion. That's taking your hands off the wheel and realizing the car was never going anywhere anyway, but you're still here, and you can dance. And Beckett doesn't give us easy answers. He gives us characters who fall down and get back up again, who forget what they just said, who repeat themselves, who cling to habits, to hats, to words. We see this and we think, how tragic, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's just honest. Maybe that's what we're all doing, repeating ourselves, failing, continuing. And maybe that's enough, because continuation in the face of absurdity is defiance. It's art. It's life. Let me ask you something. Are you waiting for life to make sense before you start living it? And if so, how long are you willing to wait? That's not a rhetorical question. It's the question. Because the absurd isn't going anywhere. The silence of the universe isn't going to suddenly speak. The plot isn't going to resolve. And yet, you're here, breathing, watching, feeling. That's not meaningless. That's present. In Beckett's world, the characters may not move forward, but they move. They persist. They exist. That's the quiet triumph. Not in solving the absurd, but in standing within it and saying, I'm still here. Not because it's meaningful, but because it's real. And that might be the most honest kind of meaning there is. The failure of language, why words can't save you, and why that's beautiful. Words are the tools we use to make sense of the world. We name things, label feelings, explain our pain, build ideas, and construct identities. Language is the framework of civilization, the bridge between minds. But what happens when that bridge starts to crumble? What happens when we realize that words can't quite grasp the depth of what we feel or the mystery of what we are? Beckett knew this intimately. His work is filled with stammering, repetition, half-finished thoughts, and silence because he understood that language, as powerful as it is, will always fall short. And instead of seeing that as a failure, he turned it into revelation. We think that if we can just say the right thing, everything will make sense. That the right explanation will fix the pain, the right affirmation will build confidence, the right story will give life meaning. But words are just symbols. They point toward something, but they are never the thing itself. You can say love, but that's not love. You can say I'm fine, but that says nothing about the storm inside. We use language like armor to protect ourselves from the rawness of experience. But Beckett strips us of that armor. He shows us characters who speak not to communicate, but to fill the silence. Who talk because silence is unbearable, but who find no salvation in speaking either. And that's the point. Beckett doesn't use language to reveal meaning, he uses it to expose its limits. He shows us what happens when we reach the edge of what can be said, when words become loops, when sentences break down, when dialogue becomes noise. It's uncomfortable, even painful. But it's also honest, because there are parts of life that language can't touch. Grief, awe, wonder, dread, these live in a space deeper than vocabulary. You can talk about them, sure, but you can't capture them. And Beckett's genius is that he doesn't try to. He lets the failure of words become the message. So what do we do with that? If language can't save us, can't explain us, can't complete us, what's left? Presence, attention, silence. The things that don't rely on articulation, the things that just are. When words fail, something else begins. A kind of seeing, a kind of listening, a kind of being that doesn't need to be defined. And this is why Beckett's work, though bleak on the surface, is actually an invitation to wake up, to stop hiding behind language, and to start feeling what's real. We live in a world obsessed with saying the right thing, with branding, scripting, captioning, explaining. But maybe what we need is less articulation and more awareness, less talking and more witnessing, less performance and more presence. Beckett's characters often speak in circles, not because they're unintelligent, but because they're confronting something too big to name. And maybe we felt that too, those moments when we try to speak our truth and the words dissolve in our mouths. That's not failure, that's the edge of truth. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you sat in silence with someone and felt more understood than any conversation ever allowed? That's the space Beckett lived in, the space beyond language, the space where meaning isn't said, it's felt, where truth isn't spoken, it's shared. And it's in that quiet, awkward, beautiful space that we begin to glimpse something deeper than understanding, connection. Language will always be imperfect. It will always reduce, simplify, distort. But that doesn't mean we stop speaking. It means we speak with humility, with awareness that our words are only approximations, that there's always more beneath the surface. And sometimes the most honest thing we can say is nothing at all. Just a breath, a glance, a pause. Beckett's work teaches us that the failure of language isn't a dead end, it's a threshold. It's where the performance ends and the real begins. It's where we stop trying to explain ourselves and start showing up as we are, uncertain, unfinished, unspoken but alive. And maybe that's what we're all really looking for. Not a perfect sentence, not the right answer, just someone who sees us in the silence and stays. Why continuing is enough, the quiet power of not giving up if there's one message that pulses through every awkward silence, every broken sentence, every motionless scene in Beckett's work. It's this: continue. But not because there's a reward, not because it gets easier, not because some final revelation is waiting at the end, but because continuing in itself is an act of defiance, a quiet, powerful resistance to the void. In a universe that offers no clear meaning, no grand narrative, no promised destination, then the simple choice to keep going without illusions is perhaps the most courageous thing we can do. We often think of meaning as something we must find first, before we act. We want to know the purpose before we commit. But Beckett flips that. He shows us that maybe the act of continuing is the purpose. That maybe the meaning isn't something you chase or discover, it's something you create by not stopping. When everything tells you to give up, to go numb, to check out and you don't, that is meaning born in real time. It's not glamorous, it's not triumphant. It's often absurd and humiliating. Beckett's characters fall down, fail, forget, despair, and then try again. Not because they believe in victory, but because something in them refuses to quit. And that refusal, that persistence without reward, is strangely beautiful. It's human, it's real, and it's something we all know deep down. That despite the pain, despite the absurdity, we want to keep going. We want to see what happens next. Maybe that's enough. Maybe we don't need a grand vision or a perfect plan. Maybe we just need to get through today, to sit with our discomfort, to show up for one more conversation, to take one more breath. That's not failure, that's strength. And Beckett knew that. He didn't tell us to hope blindly. He told us to keep going anyway. I can't go on, I'll go on. That line isn't a contradiction. It's a truth so deep it breaks language. So let me ask you, what if continuing is the most honest answer you can give to a meaningless world? What if your quiet persistence is your loudest act of rebellion? We want resolutions, arcs, clarity. But life doesn't always give us that. Sometimes all we get is the next step. And Beckett teaches us that the next step taken without certainty, without fanfare, is enough. That's where the dignity is. Not in arriving, but in enduring. Not in knowing, but in staying awake through the not knowing. You may never find the answer, but you can keep asking. You can keep living. And maybe that's the whole point. So don't wait for meaning. Don't wait for signs. Don't wait for the perfect moment to begin. You're already in it, and that is enough.